event themed Strengthening Multilateralism for Global Development and Security will serve as a platform to address key global challenges and unite Brics nations. Now, in a statement ahead of his visit to Kazan, Prime Minister Modi highlighted the bloc's role in tackling global challenges such as climate change, economic integration, and multilateralism. This will be the first summit of the group following its expansion in January this year. The group, comprising Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, have now also added Iran, Egypt, Ethiopia, and the United Arab Emirates. Leaders are expected to adopt the Kazan Declaration, which will shape the future for Brics cooperation. Prime Minister Modi today is likely to hold a bilateral with President Vladimir Putin on his second trip to Russia this year, after he had earlier visited Moscow in July for the Indo-Russia Annual Summit. He'd also convened a bilateral meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin at that time as well. But the other possible bilateral which is in the spotlight is between India and China, with both nations reaching an agreement in eastern Ladakh, where the two armies have been in a standoff for 4 years. The stage now looks set for a possible Modi-Jinping meet in Russia. While there has been no official confirmation so far, the stage is set for possible bilateral, if not at least a pull-aside between India's Prime Minister and Chinese President Xi Jinping. PM Modi and Jinping had not had a formal bilateral meeting since April-May 2020, when the Chinese PLA's attempts to alter the status quo along the LAC in eastern Ladakh led to a military standoff with India and led to fatalities on both sides. Just yesterday, both nations had agreed to disengage at the border, where 50,000 to 60,000 troops have been stationed on either side. Now, we've got the first reaction to the army chief coming in to the patrolling agreement that was signed between India and China yesterday. The army chief has given a statement saying that we are trying to restore trust and want to go back to the status quo of April 2020, which is just before the Galwan incident happened. Listen.
So as of now, what has happened? We are trying to restore the trust. How the trust will get restored? It will get restored once we are able to see each other. And we are able to convince each other, look, the buffer zones which are there, which have been created, we are not creeping. And both have to reassure each other. Petroleum gives you that kind of advantage. So that's what is something which is commencing. And as we restore the trust, the other stages will also follow through.
So now I'm being joined by my two guests who can give us both the diplomatic and the military side of the picture. I've been joined by Suresh Kumar Goel, former ambassador, and Major General Sanjay Soy, a noted defense expert. Thank you both, gentlemen, for joining me. Good afternoon to both of you. Major General Soy, let me start with you first, because we just heard the Army Chief's statement coming in that the efforts are to restore status quo to April 2020. The national question then that just arises is that has India forgotten, or do we choose to forget all that's been happening for the last 4 years since Galwan? And more importantly, can we trust China now, at least militarily?
Absolutely. Tanshu, it's first thing is, it's a good news. Whatever one may say, that it is a good news that we have reached an agreement. And actually, it also speaks that the stand which had taken, that there would not be any major relationship development without the things becoming normal on the border. As a military man, as since you asked me as a military man, I would say that we got to remain alert, because we cannot trust China, and the way they have developed further their infrastructure, the camps, their barracks in the border areas, villages have been adopted, their troops have movement have taken place. So they have built up a lot in last since 2020. So we got to remain cautious. We got to remain alert, and we got to continue with our development of infrastructure towards LAC, which is much behind the way Chinese are connected to the border. And second thing is, we got to continue with the modernization of armed forces. And I would say here that modernization of armed forces cannot take place without the overall development, technological development in India, because then only we can be Atmanirbhar. However, one good thing which has happened is, it is just a matter of caution, but in the beginning only I said that it's a good news, because there are many things. Both the most populated countries are neighbors, and there are a lot we can grow together. We can do much better. India has become a largest trading partner of the China. And with this thing, like last year, it was almost $114 billion, and this year it may touch more than $118 billion. We are the largest trading partner. So it can go up many notches,
Okay.
and both can benefit from the technological advancement, trade, and business, and just less expenditure on the border if the faith develops, if the confidence builds up. But the fact is, China has to maintain that they remain cautious of the expansionist policy. They're been trying to surround India with the Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, Maldives, Myanmar. I mean, number of things they have been trying to encircle India with. You can say that is where probably it reduces the trust factor. As an army man, as a man on ground, one has to remain that this is my line of control. I got to guard it. That is where it is. Hitanshu.
Okay. All right. So as we speak, Major General Soy, China has confirmed its side from its own end that it has also reached an agreement to end the standoff between the two armies. So as you have been pointing out, Major General Soy, this is at least good news on the face of it in terms of a de-escalation of potential hostilities. So the natural question that then brings me to Ambassador Goel at this point is, now that Prime Minister Modi and Chinese President Xi Jinping are at the same city at the same time for the same summit here, has the stage now been set for a possible bilateral, maybe even a pull aside? There has been no official confirmation so far, but as they say, it's time to strike while the iron is hot. Do we expect some sort of a some sort of an engagement between Prime Minister Modi and President Jinping right now in BRICS?
Thank you very much. When you said strike when the iron is hot, I do not know which iron is hot here and which iron has gone cold. But the point really here is India and China, being the two biggest economies of Asia, second and the fifth largest economies in the world, technologically advancing, and most importantly, with the kind of interdependency that exists between the two countries. Major General Swami mentioned about possible $118 billion of trade. But the fact is that most of this trade is taking place in the goods, which are essential for our own infrastructural development. Solar power, telecommunications, road construction, etc., etc. The list is endless. Therefore, in that sense, that trade is not just basically growing, but it is essential to our own development strategy and our own economic growth. So we have to work together. That is important. Now, if we have been able to come to an agreement on patrolling of the line of control, either way, whether it is status quo ante 2020, or we don't know the details. But the point is that if both the sides have agreed, that means both the sides are quite content with what has been achieved. Considering that this is a difficult negotiation, it has been extending over 4 years. So the essential item is that thing that agreement has been reached. We will go back to patrolling of the LOC as per the agreement, and the relationship can then resume the normal track. One thing that I would like to say here, and echo what Mr. General Soy said, in diplomatic parlor, we always, there was a very well-known phrase, trust but verify. Eventually, all relationships are based on trust, confidence building measures and everything. But we have to basically keep on verifying that what we have promised to each other is actually happening on the ground the way we understand. And China has been known in the past, not just last 4 years, even earlier, to basically have their own way of interpreting the understandings which are completely contrary to our understanding. So I think we need to be careful so that we are on the same track and then resume from here the bilateral relationship, which is important for both of us and the world. Yes.
Ambassador Goy, I get the message completely loud and clear from your statement that it's important not to get swayed away and come up with optical A situation which may then look foolish in the years to come or the months to come if China once again reneges on its agreement as it has been known to do so. So let me then switch a focus to the other larger picture that's happening in terms of the BRICS summit itself. We do know that Prime Minister Modi has a bilateral schedule with Vladimir Putin, the Russian president, sometime this evening. And then I would like you, Ambassador Goel, for you to comment on that. The significance of BRICS as an event had come just on the heels of another very similar grouping which was held at Pakistan with the SCO summit. Now, both BRICS and SCO, the two largest non-Western international groupings around, but they include both India and China and have a presence of Russia. How important do you see BRICS and at least India's position in BRICS to try and leverage itself as the leader of the non-West or the global South, a position which it finds a lot difficult to leverage, say, in the SCO, for instance?
I think both India and China are important members of BRICS, considering that because the way BRICS was actually formed, it was considered more of an economic entity, and it was considered basically formed in terms of establishing an institution or an organization of non-West countries, which I can say in the modern parlor is global South. The South countries coming together for their own modern economic priorities. And therefore, again, rather than using the leveraging of the positions, because nowadays leveraging does lead to different kinds of understanding, it is important that the country members of BRICS work together to achieve their aim without making it a kind of a play of individual strengths. That will not really help anyone at all. They should bring in the strength together for the whole global South. And I do hope, and this is something which is very important, I do hope that China, particularly in this case, will not try to again make it an individual country level play for their own distinct advantage, which they have done it in the past. And India should also not do it and work together for the global South, which I'm sure we will.
Okay, Major General Soy, my last question before I move on. The agenda which you foresee would be the one which would dominate. What would be your talking points in your mind for the Modi-Putin bilateral that happened sometime later this afternoon? In the last meeting which had happened a few months ago, one of the big takeaways was the assurance from Russia that there will be no Indian participants or Indian combatants in the Russia-Ukraine war. Yet after that, we've seen there has still been some Indian casualties, at least in terms of engaging in the Russian military. So evidently that process of withdrawal is not completed or happened to its full extent. Do you see that being a priority of the talks today between President Putin and Prime Minister Modi?
Absolutely, Tanshu. In fact, yes, you're right that last time we had taken a stand. But most of these people who are going there, they're not going, they're going in an individual capacity. They're being hired by the private security companies, and then they go there and then they
Indeed.
work for Russia. And most of them are working at the logistic basis or in the convoys, during the convoy, mainly in the logistic work or communication work. I mean, line of communication, not the signal communication. So at times, because of the attacks, drone attacks, or in the depth areas, the casualties do take place because Ukraine has carried out number of attacks on their ammunition dumps, on their convoys, or in the logistic basis to cripple so that the Russia is not able to sustain the war for long. So that is where the casualties have taken place. Of course, it is a point to be taken, but yes, of course, a couple of other things